On August 8, 2024, a 44-year-old man became the richest person in all of China. 2 weeks later, he lost $14 billion in a single day. It was the worst one-day loss of his life. And here's the strangest part. The company that lifted him to the top and then dropped him. He had already let it go 3 years earlier. He walked away. Why would a man leave at the very peak? Who walks away from a machine that prints money? To answer that, you first have to understand the machine. In America, it's called Temu. In China, the company behind it is called Pinduoduo. In just 3 years, it did something that should have been impossible. It covered the same ground Amazon took 25 years to cross. It grew so fast that even Amazon couldn't sit still. And the king of retail was forced to do something it had always considered beneath itself. And yet, at the very moment it reached the top, a single rule almost no one had ever heard of erased nearly half of its American users in just 2 months. No competitor, no scandal, no hack. What brought it down was something underneath its own feet. This isn't just the story of one company. It's a story about speed, about a rise so fast it broke every rule of common sense, and about what waits at the end of that speed. Let's go back to its golden days. In the fall of 2022, Temu launched in the United States. Nobody took it seriously. Just another shopping app from China, here to make some noise. But what happened next kept the entire retail industry awake at night. In 2 short years, it became the most downloaded free app in Apple's store, #1, 2 years running. Open it, and you'd see 99-cent earbuds, $1.50 phone case, clothes for a few bucks, free shipping, and free stuff handed to you almost daily. But the real hook wasn't the price. It was the design. Have you noticed? Open Temu, and there's always a wheel spinning on your screen, a red countdown clock ticking down, a progress bar whispering, "Invite one more friend, and this order is free." That's not shopping. That's a slot machine. It took every trick a casino uses to keep you from walking away and dropped them straight into your shopping cart. Americans cursed it. This cheap junk can't possibly work, while their fingers refused to stop tapping. By now you might think, so it's just burning cash and playing mind games. No, heavy ads, selling at a loss, manipulation. Anyone could do that. If that's what you think, you're underestimating it. Because what really made Temu run was a piece of math you can't explain. Picture this: a $5 item, packed one by one in a Chinese factory, flown halfway around the world across the Pacific, delivered to a doorstep in America. The shipping alone should cost more than the product itself. And yet it shipped, and still made money. How is that even possible? The answer hides in a crack buried in American law, ignored for decades. It has a name. It's called the de minimis exemption. The rule is simple. Any package worth less than $800 shipped into the United States comes in tax-free and customs barely inspects it. You might pause here. $800. Isn't that threshold awfully high? It is. By global standards, that number is absurdly high. In most countries, this tax-free line sits at just a few dozen dollars. A single pair of shoes would blow past it. But America, over the years, kept raising it all the way to $800. A gap that was meant to be a narrow crack had been pried open into a wide-open gate, and everything Temu sold, a few dollars, a few dozen dollars, always slipped neatly under that gate. Tax-free, uninspected, straight through. Everyone else had to build warehouses in America, stock inventory, pay duties, cost piled on cost. Temu skipped all of it. Shipped direct from the factory, every package tax-free. That was the real secret behind its impossible prices. Everyone else built their house inside the wall. Temu slipped in through a crack in it. Once you understand that, you finally understand the company. But that's only half the story. A crack in the law can make you cheap. Conquering a whole country in 3 years takes more than cheap. Cheap things are everywhere. So why this one? Why did it become an addiction? For that, we have to go back to its origins. Back to a name that millions of Chinese people both love and hate. Pinduoduo. Rewind to China, 2015. Back then, the game of Chinese e-commerce looked finished. On one side, Alibaba. On the other, JD.com. Two mountains pressing down on the entire market. Everyone agreed. Anyone else who stepped in was walking to their death. But a man named Colin Huang didn't see it that way. His background was ordinary. Born in 1980 on the outskirts of Hangzhou to 2 ordinary factory workers. As a boy, his dream wasn't to get rich, it was to become a scientist. He went to America, became an engineer at Google, and could have lived a comfortable, respectable life in Silicon Valley. But he came back. Back to the very world everyone said had no room left. He didn't fight for the well-served city professionals. He turned his eyes to the place everyone else had ignored. The small towns, the villages, the vast countryside of China. Hundreds of millions of people lived there. They wanted to buy things too, but they were sensitive to price, sensitive to the very last penny. Huang gave them a new way to shop. He called it team buying. Buy alone and it's expensive. Round up 3 or 4 relatives and friends to buy together, and it's cheap. Shopping went from a solo act to a group event. It flowed along the network Chinese people knew best. The family chats, the hometown groups, the classmate threads inside WeChat, spreading like water. You pull me in, I pull you in, 1 tells 10, 10 tell 100. Within a few years, Pinduoduo's annual active buyers soared past 900 million. 900 million. That's most of an entire country, packed into a single app. In a crack the 2 mountains never bothered to look at, a giant tree had grown. By now, you can probably smell it. This company is built around one instinct. Find the crack, slip through it, and stretch that crack into a whole sky. At home, the crack was the rural market the giants ignored. Abroad, the crack was a tax loophole the law forgot. It's always been the same road. And what pushed that road to its limit was an almost ruthless control over its supply chain. On Temu, this strategy has a name, the fully managed model. It means this: the factory just makes the product. Everything else, the pricing, the operations, the logistics, who to sell to, at what price, is handed entirely to the platform. Every middleman who wanted a cut was cut out. A product that cost pennies to make in a factory was placed, nearly naked of markup, straight onto an American's phone screen. Cheap was no longer a sale. Cheap had become the way it breathed. Now stack it all together. A legal crack that let packages in tax-free, a Chinese supply chain that crushed costs to the bone, and a casino-style interface that kept you hooked. 3 forces fused into one. And you get a machine no one had ever seen. A machine that could copy the cheapest in the world endlessly. Wall Street understood this machine, and so the money came rushing in like a tide. Pinduoduo's parent company went public in America, trading under the ticker PDD. The stock exploded. Revenue climbed from a few $1 million in 2016 to nearly $60 billion by 2024. In 8 years, it multiplied more than 10,000-fold, a growth rate that ranks among the steepest in all of business history. Then, in May 2024, a symbolic thing happened. Pinduoduo's market value passed Alibaba's. You have to understand who Alibaba is. Alibaba is Jack Ma's empire, the colossus that ruled Chinese e-commerce for 20 years. And this upstart, written off as dead 9 years earlier, pushed it off its throne. And then, on August 8th, Colin Huang himself became the richest man in China. In that moment, Temu was the golden child, the darling of Wall Street. The next name everyone believed that would change the world. But it had flown too high, so high that everyone had to crane their necks to look up at it. And it was right at this moment that a line written 3,000 years ago began, quietly, to come true above its head. There's an ancient Chinese book of wisdom called the I Ching. In it, there's a passage about the life of a dragon. At its lowest, it is the hidden dragon, submerged, silent, biding its time, just like the Pinduoduo that once slipped into the forgotten rural market. Later, it becomes the flying dragon in the heavens, soaring, dazzling, watched by all, just like the Temu now sweeping across America. But the I Ching doesn't stop there. At the very highest point, it writes a warning. The arrogant dragon will have cause to regret. A dragon that climbs so high, it has nowhere left to go. What comes next is only the fall. The ancients had a blunter way of saying it. When the sun reaches noon, it begins to set. When the moon is full, it begins to wane. This isn't a curse, it's a law. The coldest, fairest law in all of heaven and earth. The moment anything reaches its peak, that peak becomes the start of its descent. And this time, the first one to say the word descent out loud wasn't an outsider. It was the company itself. Just 2 weeks after Huang became the richest man in China, Pinduoduo held an earnings call. On that call, its own executives told a room full of analysts, again and again, a line that ran a chill through everyone. The path we're on now can't continue. This kind of growth is not sustainable. A company at its absolute peak, telling Wall Street with its own mouth, stop dreaming. We're slowing down. The market's reaction was instant and brutal. That day, roughly $50 billion in market value evaporated. Huang's personal fortune shrank by $14 billion in a single day. His 2-week reign as the richest man in China was over. Remember the man at the start who lost $14 billion? Now you know what happened that day. And that was only the beginning. The truly fatal blow came later, because the crack it had climbed to the top on, that de minimis exemption that let its packages into America tax-free, was about to be sealed shut. The turning point came in 2025. The U.S. government announced the de minimis exemption is over. From now on, no matter how cheap your package, anything under $800 pays its taxes and faces inspection, just like everything else. That crack in the wall, untouched for decades, was sealed by a single hand. The consequences were instant and merciless. Temu's magic, direct from the factory, every package tax-free, stopped working overnight. Costs slammed down. The price advantage it had lived and breathed on was carved away by a single rule. The numbers don't lie. From March to May of that year, in just 2 months, of the tens of millions of Americans who once opened Temu every day, nearly half never came back. Its daily active users were cut almost in half. What knocked it down wasn't any rival. It was the crack beneath its own feet, filled in. It had built its entire tower on top of a crack in the wall. While the crack held, the tower stood. The moment the crack was sealed, the tower began to shake from its very foundation. Its greatest strength turned out to be its most fatal weakness. That is the sharpest footnote to those words. The arrogant dragon will have cause to regret. And here's the most exquisite irony of all. At Temu's fiercest moment, even Amazon couldn't sit still. In late 2024, the king of retail quietly launched something called Haul. Every item under $20, a $1.70 phone case, cheap little trinkets, shipped direct from China, taking a week or two to arrive. You read that right. It was an Amazon-flavored Temu. The ruler who had dominated e-commerce for 30 years, swallowing its pride, copying the homework of the upstart. But it copied too faithfully. So faithfully that it stepped right into the same crack, the de minimis loophole. So when that crack was sealed, Amazon's knockoff got cut by the very same blade. The crack that had once been a gold mine everyone scrambled into overnight became the trap everyone collapsed into together. Wall Street's attitude changed. The voices that once cheered it began to turn. Analysts, one after another, cut their price targets, and its stock price wrote the whole story plainly. As of the middle of 2026, the moment this video is reaching you, it had slid from a high of $139 a share a year earlier, down into the 80s, its market value gutted by more than 40%, struggling at the bottom, unable to climb back to what it was. The latest blow landed at the end of May 2026. In that quarter's earnings, its profit per share came in more than 40% below what analysts expected. The news hit, and the stock dropped nearly 8% in a day, slammed down into the low 80s, near its lowest point in a year. That story that once sounded too good to be true had become a question mark investors didn't dare look at too closely. The way Wall Street abandons something is never loud. No shouting, no stampede, just no new buying. Just a quiet downgrade, just a turning away, looking elsewhere. After the loudest applause fades, what's left behind is a long, meaningful silence. By now you might think, this is just another old story of a bubble bursting. Flew high, fell hard, that's all. But if that's all you see, you've missed the heart of it. Because the deepest part of this story isn't how hard Temu fell, it's this. Was there someone who saw all of it coming? There was, and it was the very man who built the machine. Let's go back to Colin Huang, back to the decision no one could understand. As early as 2020, with the company at its height, Huang stepped down as CEO. The next year he went further. He resigned as chairman too, handed all the voting rights of his shares to the board, and walked away. What did he go do? He went into research, food science, life science. Back to that childhood dream of becoming a scientist. A man who built a company from a hopeless dead end into one of the richest on earth. At its hottest moment, he willingly laid down all his power. This exact thing had been done once before, 25 centuries ago. His name was Fan Li. He served the king of the ancient state of Yue, endured years of hardship, and in a single campaign, destroyed a rival kingdom, rising to the highest place a statesman could reach. Everyone assumed he would stay and enjoy the glory, but at that very summit, he quietly slipped away, leaving behind a single line. Under a great name, one cannot dwell for long. To stand in the highest, loudest place, you cannot stay there long. He changed his name, became a merchant, made a fortune 3 times over, and 3 times gave it all away. History gave him one phrase, and that phrase is the key to this entire story: knowing when to stop. Fan Li's wisdom wasn't about how to climb to the top. It was knowing this: the summit isn't a place to stand, it's a place to leave. Colin Huang, in his own way, is a modern Fan Li. He turned around at the peak and left himself a way out. But the machine he built can't do that. A company can master advance. Find the crack, slip through, stretch it into a sky. Huang's company perfected that word. But a machine that only knows how to sprint can never learn how to stop. It bet everything on a single thing, being the cheapest. And when the foundation of that one thing was pulled away, it had no second leg to stand on. This isn't the fate of one company alone. It's the wall that every power built on a single trick must eventually face. The sharper the trick, the harder the wall comes. So is there any hope for Temu? Maybe. It's trying to save itself, moving warehouses onto American soil, changing direct from China into ship from local, trying to route around the sealed crack and find a new road. But that road means higher costs, slower speed, thinner profits. it has to learn to take a dragon that only knew how to fly and slow it down. Can it learn? Can it turn from a story that only knows how to advance into a story that also knows how to stop? No one knows the answer, not Wall Street, not Pinduoduo itself. The only thing we can be sure of is that law written 3,000 years ago. When the sun reaches noon, it begins to set. When the moon is full, it begins to wane. The sun rises as always and sets as always. The moon fills and the moon wanes. It's only when the tide goes out that you finally see whose roots run deep and whose splendor was just a borrowed gust of wind. Temu conquered America, that much is true. But a true business empire isn't measured by how fast it rises. It's measured by whether it can withstand the dusk that must, inevitably, follow its own dawn. And that dusk, Temu has only just begun to walk into it, while the man who built it had already, while the sky was still bright, walked out alone. The fast win a stretch of the race, the steady go the distance. But the ones who know how to turn around at the very top, they're the ones who truly win in the end. The Chinese have thought about this for thousands of years. From the dragon in the I Ching that knows when to pull back, to the statesman who slipped quietly away at his highest point. What they left us was never a manual for reaching the top. It was something else. How, once you're there, to keep your own height from devouring you. This is the way of commerce. This is the Shang Dao. And on this channel, we'll keep telling these stories one by one. The Chinese companies that climbed to the top of the world, their rise, their reckoning, and the ancient Eastern wisdom hidden behind it all. If you want to understand this great game that stretches across past and present, stay with us. The next story is coming soon.